Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into the 20th century, and we've got Eric Hobsbawm as our guide.
Oh, Hobsbawm, he's brilliant. He doesn't just tell you what happened, he makes you feel the currents of history.
Right, like he's giving us this X-ray vision to
Mhm.
see how the events of the 20th century still affect us today.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really struck me was his take on the 1917 Russian Revolution.
Ah,
It wasn't just about Russia. It was like this earthquake that shifted the ground for everyone. Suddenly, we're looking at the world through this lens of capitalism versus socialism.
it's amazing how this one event reverberated across the globe, right? You had the rise of the Soviet Union and boom, this whole new framework for understanding economic systems. But Hobsbawm, he argues that this whole capitalist versus socialist thing is not as simple as it seems.
Hold on, are you saying that putting labels on entire nations like capitalist or socialist, it's like trying to oversimplify a really complex picture?
Exactly. When you look at how economies actually functioned in different countries, even those within the same world, it gets, well, messy. There was a lot of experimentation going on.
So instead of two neat boxes, capitalist and socialist, it's more like a spectrum, with countries blending elements of both.
Precisely. And here's where Hobsbawm really makes you think he questions those categories altogether. He uses the example of the US and Japan often being grouped together as capitalist, but then you have South Korea, which is often put in a different category. But are the differences really that clear-cut?
Makes you wonder, what really defines an economic system then? Is it the label we slap on it? Or is it about how people actually live and work within that system?
That's the question Hobsbawm wants us to grapple with. He pushes us to move beyond those easy labels and dig deeper into the complexities.
Like we need to look beyond the surface,
Yeah.
right? To understand the inner workings, the mechanisms.
Exactly. And speaking of mechanisms, let's talk about how capitalism itself transformed during the 20th century. It's like we often think of capitalism as this machine, right? All gears and levers and just focused on profit.
Yeah, kind of cold and personal.
Exactly. But Hobsbawm argues that it's way more intertwined with our social lives than we realize.
Oh, okay, I'm intrigued. So how does he connect those dots?
Well, he points to institutions like, well, think about the family. Historically, the family played this huge role in making capitalism work.
Really? How so?
Think about it. For markets to function, people need stability, right? They need trust. You have to believe that contracts will be honored, that goods will be delivered, that the system isn't totally rigged against you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does the family fit into that?
Those things, that stability, that trust, it doesn't just appear out of thin air. It's built on social norms. And the family, historically, has been a primary source of that kind of social glue.
So capitalism relies on a certain degree of, like, social cohesion,
Hmm.
a shared understanding of how things work.
Exactly. And this is where Hobsbawm's argument gets really interesting, especially, well, think about today's world.
We're all about individualism now, right?
Exactly, hyper-individualism. And what Hobsbawm reminds us is that a purely transactional view of human relationships, it's not enough to sustain a healthy society, let alone a booming economy.
You're saying that by eroding those social bonds, we might actually be undermining the very system we depend on.
Now you're getting it. And this leads us to another major theme in Hobsbawm's work, this idea of a cultural earthquake that rocked the 20th century.
Oh yeah, the 20th century, talk about upheaval. It's like everything was changing at warp speed.
It really was. And Hobsbawm connects these cultural shifts back to the economic and political stuff we've been talking about. For example, he argues that the economic boom after World War II, it actually fueled this cultural explosion.
So more money in people's pockets meant more freedom to, like, experiment.
Exactly. More leisure time, more resources, and bam. This led to new artistic movements, musical genres, you name it. Jazz, rock and roll, later hip hop, each reflected these changing times.
And it wasn't just music, right? Fashion changed drastically too. Like blue jeans went from being workwear to, like, a symbol of rebellion.
It's amazing how these everyday things, clothes, music, hairstyles, became these powerful statements. And it wasn't limited to one place. These trends went global.
The world was becoming more interconnected, and young people were leading the charge.
Absolutely. The rise of youth culture had a huge impact, challenging traditional ideas about authority. It led to a less hierarchical society where young people actually had a voice.
It wasn't just young people, though, right? Women were experiencing their own revolution, too.
Absolutely. The 20th century saw a massive shift in the role of women, driven by so many factors. Economic changes, technological advancements, and of course, the tireless efforts of feminist movements all over the world.
More women entered the workforce, fought for equal rights.
challenged traditional gender roles. It was huge.
And don't forget about reliable contraception. That was a game changer for women's control over their own lives and bodies.
Absolutely. It allowed women to pursue education, careers. They could delay marriage and having kids, and really have more say in their own destinies.
The 20th century really did shatter that old image of what a woman should be.
It did. And this goes back to Hobsbawm's main point, which is that we can't separate these things. You can't understand the big political and economic changes without also understanding the massive cultural shifts happening at the same time.
They're all intertwined like threads in a tapestry.
Precisely. And understanding that is key to making sense of today's world. The 20th century's legacy is everywhere.
It's like we're still living in the aftershocks of that cultural earthquake.
That's a great way to put it. And as we move deeper into the 21st century, it's more important than ever to understand those forces that shaped us. Both the triumphs and the, well, not so triumphant parts.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Exactly. And on that note, well, let's transition to another fascinating aspect of Hobsbawm's analysis, his look at the role of science and technology.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of the 20th century with insights from Eric Hobsbawm. Before the break, we were talking about science and technology, how it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Incredible advancements, but also these, well, unintended consequences.
And one of the biggest ones, and Hobsbawm really hones in on this, is our impact on the environment. It's like throughout the 20th century, we see environmentalism going from this fringe idea to a major social and political force.
People started realizing that all this progress was coming at a cost, right?
Exactly. It wasn't just about, oh, we need to save the whales, though that's important too. It was this dawning awareness that, hey, if we keep going like this, we're messing with the very systems that keep us alive.
We saw those warning signs throughout the 20th century, right? Oil spills, nuclear accidents.
Right. We were pushing the limits of technology, of industrialization, without really knowing where those limits were.
Kind of a scary thought when you put it like that.
And it's connected to another big theme that Hobsbawm tackles, this persistence of inequality. Even with all this amazing progress, he's saying, look, we achieved some incredible things as a species in the 20th century, but those benefits, they weren't shared equally.
Right. It's like this two-sided coin, right? On one side, you've got advancements in medicine, technology, people are living longer, better lives in many ways. But then on the other side,
you still have poverty, discrimination, wars.
It's that old saying, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Dickens, right? We can't just focus on the shiny parts of the 20th century and pretend the dark stuff didn't happen.
Exactly. And that's what makes Hobsbawm such a crucial guide. You know, he's not giving us easy answers. He's forcing us to sit with the complexity.
To see the good, the bad, and the well, the really, really complicated.
Exactly. He's asking us to look at history with clear eyes, with nuance, not through rose-colored glasses.
So understanding that messiness, those contradictions, that's how we learn from the past, right? So we don't repeat the same mistakes.
Right. And that's even more important now, as we're dealing with all these massive challenges in the 21st century: globalization, climate change, technology changing faster than we can keep up. We need those historical lessons now more than ever.
It's like we're standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before us,
right,
looking back at their choices, the paths they took, and then we get to choose our own direction.
That's a great way to put it. And that's what makes Hobsbawm so relevant even today. He's not just telling us what happened, he's giving us a framework for understanding it, and hopefully for making better choices ourselves.
Wow, what a journey. This deep dive into the 20th century has given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap things up?
The biggest takeaway, I think, is that history isn't just dates and names in a textbook. It's alive. It's a force shaping our world right now. And by understanding the 20th century, its triumphs and its tragedies, well, maybe, just maybe, we can create a better future.
Beautifully said. And that's a wrap on this deep dive into the 20th century with Eric Hobsbawm. We've only scratched the surface, though, so go explore his work, dive deeper, and keep those conversations going. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.